Hi everyone, and welcome back. Today I'll walk you through how to take the chilled sugar cookie dough that we made in a previous episode and roll it out, shape it, and then bake it. I will walk you through two different ways to actually roll out dough. Incidentally, the methods that I show you could be used for other types of cookie dough out there. It's pretty universal. What you'll need in order to accomplish this is, well, the dough that's chilled, a rolling pin. Before you I have two examples of rolling pins. This one right here is a marble pen with handles. You can use this. This is a little bit heavier. That's why I like it, because it does most of the work for me. Or you can have a wooden one with handles on the end. You can also, this is another type of rolling pin that has no handles on the end of it. I actually like, this is my favorite rolling pin. This is kind of like my baby. I really, really like this pin. You'll need to have some parchment paper. I like to use a lot of parchment paper in this process. You'll understand why as soon as you see me do it. A little bit of flour and some cookie cutters. The better the variety, the more fun you'll have. I like to use some bigger cookie cutters. Part of the reason for this is it gives me more room to decorate things, and I like to decorate things. Even with simplistic designs, it will look fantastic. You'll also need to have a cookie sheet. This is my favorite type of cookie sheet. You notice it's really, really shiny, but it also has a lip to it. That's perfectly fine. I like these because I can use them for many things and they're stackable. But if you have one that's completely flat and it has no lip, that's perfectly fine too. I'm going to walk you through a couple of ways of how to roll out sugar cookie dough. I'm going to walk you through, well, there's method one and then there's my favorite method. So I'll begin with method one. In order to do method one, I like to also have what's called a bench scraper. If you don't have a bench scraper, any kind of spatula that you use that is able to fit underneath your dough will work just fine. I begin with a couple of pinches of flour and I throw that on my surface. See how I have a nice dusting on my surface? That's what I'm looking for. I've unwrapped this dough. And you see how it broke apart, so I'm pushing it together. It's really important to know how to overwork dough so that you don't do it. Overworked dough will result in a very, very crisp cookie that's just not going to be pleasant. Overworking dough happens by a couple of techniques. The first one is too much flour on your surface and too much flour on your rolling pins. So you want to be cautious with how much flour you're putting on your surface. You want enough so it doesn't really stick. Notice how I floured the surface and now I'm moving this around. I'm making sure that nothing is sticking. And you want to have enough on your rolling pin that it doesn't stick on your rolling pin. I like to flour the rolling pin as opposed to the top of the dough, but sometimes a little bit of flour lands on the dough too. It's not a big deal. The other way to overwork your dough is to just keep manhandling it. You really don't want to manhandle it so that it gets hot. Ready for my bench scraper? Again, if you don't have a bench scraper, trusty dusty little spatula. Any kind of spatula will help with that. See how it just got right underneath? That's great. Now I move this around. And I just roll out my dough. See how it's cracking a little bit here? That's because the dough is cold. There's nothing wrong with this. Now I'm taking my bench scraper and moving this around. I'm moving the dough around so that it doesn't stick to the surface. All right, that's about the thickness I want. Let me tear off a piece and show you how thick. I'm not going too thick here, see? It's probably about 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to do some plain squares. And if the dough starts sticking to your cookie cutter, just take a little flour on the edges of your cookie cutter and go ahead and use it again. This particular cookie is trying to stick, so I'm going to grab that lovely spatula that I have, and I'm just going to come underneath it. There we go. And it came up beautifully. And let's put the little turtle on the sheet pan too. So this is what the sheet pan looks like so far. Okay. Let me move this dough out of the way, and we're going to re-roll it in a minute. You want to limit the number of times you're re-rolling it, because with every re-roll, you are making more gluten development. Gluten develops passively, but it also develops when it's handled. That's why you need dough. Well, in essence, you do not want to knead your cookie dough. So if you take a look here, notice this guy has a little bit of cracks. That's okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to gently press those little cracks together so that when it bakes up, they just disappear. And nobody is the wiser. Completely none the wiser. Oh, look, I have a little bitty divot in the turtle here. So I'm just going to patch up his leg a little bit. There we go. Now he's a turtle that can swim. All right. So because I don't want to overwork this dough, notice I had all those scraps, I'm going to press it together gently. All right. And I'm going to make sure there's a tiny bit of flour underneath here. There we go. A little bit of flour on my, see how it's dusted off my fingers, onto the rolling pin. Oops, that's okay. See how it's stuck to the rolling pin? Not a big deal, but it does tell me that I need just a little bit more. So I patted my fingers in the flour like this, and now I'm just going to rub it on top. Pat, rub, roll. Pat, rub, roll. Now that I've rolled this one twice, I'm really not going to roll this for a third time. However, if you want to bake off some of these scraps, feel free to. They taste just as delicious. Now for my favorite way to roll out cookie dough. It uses 2 sheets of parchment paper. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put the sugar cookie dough in between the 2 parchment papers, just like a sandwich, and I'm going to roll it out like that. I actually like this method better because I'm not adding flour to it, so I'm reducing the risk of having too much gluten development and then yielding a beautiful, tender product. So I begin. You can see it's sandwiched in between, and I just start rolling. Now this dough is chilly, so it's a little bit hard to roll out, but that's okay. I flip it, and part of the reason why I flip it, you see these wrinkles that the parchment makes? That's okay. Just pick up the parchment and put it back on the surface. I also see there's a little bit of thick spot right here. So I'm actually going to turn it this way, and I'm going to roll the thick spot out that way. So I'm going to roll it out one direction. I'm doing this one direction technique because if I sit here and I do this back and forth, what I'm going to do is I'm going to push some of the dough that way, and then I'm going to push some of the dough towards me, and in the end it's going to be thin in the middle and thick on the ends, and it just takes forever to do it that way. So now I'm going to take off the top part of the parchment. It came away easy, And I'm going to check to make sure that the bottom part of the parchment also comes away easy. Oh, a little sticking. That's not too bad. If for whatever reason you find that you can't pull these two pieces of parchment apart, no problem. Just stick it in the refrigerator for about 5 to 10 minutes. After that 5 to 10 minutes, check to see if it'll pull apart easily. It should at that point, just because it's a little cooler. When it starts getting difficult, that's when you know it's warm. As you can see, I have this gigantic wrinkle on the surface of this cookie. There's two things I can do. When I place it on the cookie sheet, I can then tap it out. And if for whatever reason that tapping doesn't quite take it all out, I just flip it over, and that's now the bottom. And nobody knows. Now that I have my cookie dough on the cookie sheets and they're ready to go, I'm going to take it straight to the freezer. I bet you thought I was going to say the oven, didn't you? It can go in the freezer or it can go in the refrigerator. These are going to go in the freezer for about 10 minutes, and in the refrigerator you can go 15 to 20 minutes. I like to do that because I want my cookie dough to be so nice and chilled. That way when it reaches the oven, it goes from a cold cookie dough to a hot oven. The oven will be preheated at 325 degrees because I have a convection oven. If you don't have a convection oven, please use 350 degrees. If you do have a convection oven, that's the oven with the fans on it, then go to 325. Feel free to bake up the scraps for your cookie dough. Cookie dough scraps are delicious, and they can be used as other decorating mechanisms for other things like cakes in the future, or frankly you can just stick it, you can crumble it up and stick it on top of ice cream, for example. Or you can even sprinkle a little sugar on them. Make them appealing to the kiddos. Or the big children, as the case may be. I have orange, so I'm just going to do a little orange sprinkle right on top. The cookies have been baked, and look at that. See this beautiful golden edge? That's exactly what I was looking for. Look at how the turtle is a little bit darker right here. That's not a big deal because honestly, what's going to happen is when I decorate them, nobody's going to know. Let's eat a scrap then. Look at the inside of that cookie. Beautiful crumb texture. It's buttery. It's sweet. It's vanilla-y. Thank you for joining me on how to roll out, punch out, and bake sugar cookies. To learn how to decorate them, please refer to my third part of this series, which is some basic, simple sugar cooking decorating techniques that will make it look elegant and yet be easy. If you enjoyed this video, please press like and or subscribe. If you have any comments or suggestions, please put them in the comments and suggestions. Thank you.
Cock up in monster!